8 years ago, I went through a divorce with my wife, who was 48 at the time. My daughter, who is now 28, chose to cut all contact with me and sided with her mother without considering my feelings. Despite the divorce occurring nearly a decade ago, accepting the situation and finding peace in my life took considerable time. This was exacerbated by my ex-wife's attempts to tarnish my reputation. The most challenging aspect, however, was being entirely shut out from my daughter's life, especially since she was an adult at the time. Lacking any family support except for my mother, who had Alzheimer's, made the ordeal one of the most difficult experiences of my life. Although I attempted to contact my daughter multiple times post-divorce, she remained firm in her decision to side with her mother, refusing to listen to my perspective. At one point, my ex-wife even took legal action, accusing me of harassment if I continued trying to reach out to our daughter. Faced with this threat, I ceased all attempts to reconnect. Over the past 8 years, I focused on caring for my mother and building my career. Despite a few casual relationships, the scars from my divorce have left me hesitant to trust others fully. I acknowledge that my narrative may sound bleak, but this has been my reality for nearly a decade. Recently, my daughter reached out to me, bringing a mix of emotions. I was elated, hoping that she had finally reconsidered her stance on the divorce. This contact was especially comforting because my mother had recently passed away, and I was navigating through the grief alone. A few months after my mother's death, I received a call from an unfamiliar number. On the other end was a woman's voice, introducing herself as my daughter. I hadn't recognized her voice after all these years. She explained that she had learned about her grandmother's passing on Facebook and wanted to check up on me. I was taken aback when my daughter called. I had no idea she kept tabs on me online, finding it sweet. Grateful for the call, I assured her I was doing well and expressed how much I missed her. We chatted, and she suggested meeting in person instead of over the phone. Excitedly, we agreed to meet at my house over the weekend. Anticipation filled me as I looked forward to reconnecting after all these years. Writing this post, I share my excitement with anyone reading, hoping to rebuild our relationship or, at the very least, get to know each other better. When my daughter arrived for dinner, I was both nervous and thrilled. Opening the door, I struggled to recognize her after nearly a decade, remembering her as a little girl. As we began talking, the initial awkwardness faded, and we both opened up. She shared details about her life and work, and I reciprocated with my own experiences. After dinner, we finally addressed the elephant in the room. I asked her why she never listened to my side of the story during the divorce and automatically sided with her mom. I acknowledged her mother's more significant presence as a stay-at-home mom compared to my long hours in construction. I admitted to doing my best to make time for her. In response, my daughter expressed regret about how things unfolded. She admitted to being too young to think things through and acknowledged manipulation by her mom's portrayal of me as the ultimate villain. Since she never heard my side of the story, she never questioned the narrative her mother presented. Whatever her mom had said, we continued our conversation until she finally disclosed the true reason for her visit. Hours into our discussion, I asked her what prompted her to reach out after such a prolonged period. There was a moment of discomfort in her expression, and I reassured her that honesty was important. She then admitted to keeping tabs on me through Facebook. When her grandmother passed away, she expected lawyers to contact her about her inheritance. However, with no such communication, she decided to contact me directly. Revealing that she had recently gotten engaged, she explained that she could use financial assistance for wedding expenses. This revelation felt like a punch in the gut. My initial hopes of reuniting with family were shattered, discovering that her motive was rooted in financial gain rather than genuine connection. Ironically, legally, the inheritance was mine, and had she been a better daughter, she would have likely received most, if not all of it. Despite my indifference towards money, living modestly in my own home and with simple preferences, I would have willingly supported her wedding if she had approached me sincerely without exploiting the situation for personal gain. While processing these thoughts, I managed to maintain composure and asked if financial assistance was her sole purpose. She became defensive, asserting that the inheritance was secondary and her true intention was to reconnect with me. Claiming she regretted not reaching out while her grandmother was alive, she expressed fear that I would never forgive her for her actions, influenced by her mother's manipulation. Despite her attempts to smooth things over, I could sense the panic in her eyes, questioning the sincerity of her words. So I contemplated whether I could forgive her, questioning if her intentions were solely driven by financial gain. Curious about how she knew of the inheritance, I inquired. She revealed that a couple of years before the divorce, while visiting my late mother, she was told that she would inherit everything left by my father, who had passed away years ago, as the only grandchild in the family. Given the context of a stable marriage at that time, it made sense for my mother to express such sentiments to my daughter. However, the idea of her caring solely about the money and giving me false hope was crushing. Despite my devastation, I concealed my emotions, recognizing that the only way to test her true intentions was to see how she would react if I told her there was no money to inherit. Inquiring about her expectations from the inheritance, she made a reasonable guess, revealing some degree of premeditation. I then informed her that her grandmother had left everything to me years ago, intending to use the money to start a business, and thus I couldn't assist her financially. Instead, I'd offered to contribute my own funds, a few $1,000s, for her wedding expenses. The disappointment on her face confirmed my fears. She expressed appreciation but insisted that, as the only grandchild, she deserved a portion of the inheritance. I stood firm in my decision, and her reaction turned visibly angry. She insisted I reconsider, but I held my ground. That's when she revealed her true colors, echoing her mother's words, labeling me a selfish person, and expressing satisfaction that I was alone in life. I looked at her with barely concealed disgust, hurt by her words and not entirely surprised. I interrupted her, stating that I should have known she was her mother's daughter and that her only reason for reaching out was to ask for a favor. Criticizing her attempt to manipulate me during a time of grief, I found it disgusting, even for someone like her. She tried to say something more, but I laughed in her face, pointing out that if she hadn't blocked me years ago, she would have received my text about her grandmother and likely obtained most, if not all, of the inheritance. This statement had the desired effect. She looked utterly baffled and inquired about my statement. I urged her to unblock me on her old number, so I could resend all the texts that had never been delivered. Compliance followed, and I forwarded messages where I pleaded with her to hear me out. I informed her about her grandmother's Alzheimer's diagnosis, expressing the urgency for them to meet before she forgot about her only grandchild entirely. This wasn't a fabrication. My mother had frequently mentioned my daughter at the onset of her illness, yearning to see her. The inability to fulfill that wish had broken my heart. Now, the audacity of this ungrateful child seeking inheritance was astounding. To my daughter's credit, she looked genuinely ashamed after reading those messages. She apologized, acknowledging her lack of understanding during the divorce. However, she argued that her grandma would want her to have her share of the inheritance, and it wasn't fair for me to deny her that. She expressed a genuine desire to rebuild our relationship, but warned that if I chose to be selfish, she wouldn't feel comfortable continuing. In response, I expressed my skepticism, stating that if money played a decisive role for her, maybe a relationship wasn't worth pursuing. Despite wanting to believe her commitment to rebuilding our relationship, I couldn't at that moment. I conceded to considering another chance at our relationship, but made it clear that the inheritance was not up for negotiation. In return, she shot me a look of pure hatred and abruptly left my house, with no attempt from me to stop her. Subsequently, I sought the advice of friends. While most agreed with my decision, one close friend suggested I forget about the money and let my daughter have at least some of it if it meant having family in my life. This perspective lingered in my mind, leading me to question whether I should reconsider and give my daughter a portion of the inheritance. Hello, everyone. This post received more responses than I anticipated, and I appreciate all your advice and opinions. It has given me the perspective I needed. To address the most common question, what happened during the divorce? I haven't discussed it in years, but I suppose it can't hurt anymore. My wife and I were married for 23 years, and despite the years, she managed to betray me. Without delving into the details, I discovered she was cheating on me with multiple men. This had apparently been going on for years before I found out. The revelation left me completely devastated, and I coped poorly, resorting to heavy drinking and engaging in destructive behavior. The constant fighting and my excessive drinking made it easy for her to manipulate our daughter into taking her side. After nearly a year of living in such a tumultuous state and being separated, we confronted each other and ultimately got divorced. My ex-wife, who was a journalist at the time and a local celebrity of sorts, used her influence to try to destroy my reputation, coming close to success. Overcoming the aftermath of the divorce took time, especially with my daughter completely abandoning me. I'll admit that during the period when I learned about my ex's affairs, I was not present as a parent. Even after the separation and for about a year post-divorce, I kept to myself and wasn't there for my daughter. Once I stopped drinking and got my life back on track, my first step was reaching out to her to apologize. However, she refused to listen and blocked me everywhere. I thought giving her time would help, but 8 years later, our relationship has only worsened with time. Now, regarding the other big question about my mom's inheritance, technically, the money belonged to my father. My grandparents, both doctors, invested in properties throughout the city during their careers. Most of these properties were rented out and brought in significant income. My father passed away. When I was 21, I left everything to Mom, and all of it remained in her name during my marriage and for a few years after my divorce, while her health was still intact. Right after Mom passed away, I inherited everything as her sole heir. In the divorce, my wife received nothing except alimony until she remarried a few years ago. This was because, at the time, my mom owned everything. So, as things stand, my daughter never got close to owning anything. She was aware that her grandma was a landlady with a couple of heirloom properties, but I never accessed that money, as the income from my old construction business was more than enough for a comfortable life. I hope I've answered all your questions. Also, my daughter hasn't reached out to me since that night, and honestly, I don't expect her to. It seems she made it clear that she endured the whole reunion for the inheritance, and now that it's no longer on the table, I don't anticipate seeing her around anymore. I'd be lying if I said I'm not upset about it. But at this point, I've learned not to expect too much from people, regardless of who they are. So that's that. Thanks to all of you for the support. I appreciate it. I'm also considering putting myself out there, getting back into dating, and finding companionship, rather than expecting ghosts from my past to reappear. Update 2. It's been quite a week, everyone. I thought that would be my last and only update, but I guess life had other plans. I had just returned from work, contemplating going out with a couple of buddies, when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, but when I opened the door, there she was, my worst nightmare. She'd had changed her hair and lost some weight. It took me a couple of seconds to recognize her. After all, it's hard to forget someone you were together with for decades. Seeing her was quite a shock, to say the least. I didn't know what to say, so I just stood there awkwardly. She then asked if I had a moment to talk about some stuff. Though hesitant, I didn't want her standing at my door, so I invited her in. The atmosphere was undeniably awkward, as you can probably imagine. We engaged in small talk about this and that, and then she mentioned that she understood this was a little strange, but that there were some things she needed to tell me. I asked her to continue, and she explained that our daughter had reached out to her and informed her about the inheritance. I kind of saw that coming. Why else would she need to speak to me after all these years? She conveyed her understanding that the divorce was really hard on me and that she might have taken things further than she should have. I scoffed at that, but she ignored my reaction. She continued, stating that I shouldn't punish our daughter for what happened between us, parroting some of the same sentiments my daughter had expressed, such as her being very young at the time of the divorce and my inability to be resentful toward her for choosing her mother over me, she went on. I interrupted her at that point, stating that I harbored no resentment toward anyone anymore. Even if I held on to any anger, it wouldn't be directed at our daughter. I expressed my hurt at realizing that after all those years, she only thought of reaching out because there was a possibility of gaining some money from it. I reiterated the same sentiment I shared with my daughter. If they had tried to reconnect earlier with decency, they would have ended up with the inheritance. My ex attempted to offer some sort of defense, but I firmly asserted that my decision was final. If they were just going to go around in circles about this one thing, they were wasting everyone's time. I mentioned having plans, and if there was nothing else to discuss, she should probably leave. She nodded, apologized for bothering me, and left. After she left, I just sat there in disbelief. I never expected to see her again, let alone engage in a conversation in my own home. It was strange, bringing up a lot of old memories that I would rather have left untouched. To shake off the discomfort, I went out with my friends, attempting to forget the unexpected encounter. So yeah, that happened, and I needed to get it off my chest. Thanks for reading along if you're still here. Update 3. Another twist in the story. This afternoon, I was at work when I received a call from my daughter. Initially considering not picking up, curiosity got the best of me, and I answered. I immediately told her that if this was about the inheritance, there was little point in having a conversation. Surprisingly, she claimed it was about something else. Intrigued, I asked her to proceed. She expressed remorse. Acknowledging that she should have handled things differently, she apologized, understanding that if I was willing to forgive her and give our relationship another chance, she would be happy to have me at her wedding. This took me aback, to say the least. I questioned her certainty, and she insisted, allowing me time to think about it and let her know if I'd attend. We hung up, leaving me feeling confused. Part of me is overjoyed at the prospect of being at her wedding. But another part can't shake the suspicion that this is merely a ploy to be on my good side and eventually secure the inheritance. Yet, if she's genuine, I don't want to jeopardize the chance to be in her life. If I decline and she doesn't reach out again, I can hardly blame her. I'd appreciate some advice if anyone can help me out. Update 4. After considering the advice, I've decided to attend the wedding. Many of you suggested that it couldn't do any harm, and that makes sense. I don't have to do anything in return for the invitation. I'd simply be a guest, and I'm fine with that. I understand the significant leap from someone she hasn't spoken to in 8 years to someone walking her down the aisle. It wouldn't be comfortable for either of us. I truly hope this marks the start of a new chapter, and we can build something meaningful out of it. Thanks to all of you for listening and the advice you've given. I appreciate it and hope you wish me luck. Stay tuned for more stories from our journey. I, a 28-year-old woman, organized a surprise birthday party for my stepmom, Clara, who is 50. Clara, my dad's wife of a year, was once my bio mom's friend until a fallout a few years ago. My dad's marriage to Clara was a shock, but my brother and I tried to be supportive. However, Clara's behavior has been consistently unpleasant. She mocks us, compares us unfavorably to her successful kids, and criticizes my choices. Despite this, I organized an elaborate surprise party for her, paid half in advance, and expected some gratitude. The party turned sour when Clara didn't appreciate the effort, nitpicked everything, and insulted me in front of guests. My dad laughed along, and I couldn't tolerate it. I confronted Clara, pointing out her ingratitude, and left the party. Later, my dad called, demanding I apologize to Clara, revealing that Clara's kids funded their lifestyle. I refused and decided to cut ties with my dad unless Clara apologized. In a twist, Clara unexpectedly apologized, but it turned out they expected me to foot the bill. I blocked them, and the restaurant pressed for payment, threatening my professional reputation. My dad, desperate to salvage the situation, paid the bills and repaid me. However, our relationship soared further. He accused me of abandoning him, and we're now on no contact terms. My brother joined me in cutting ties, And even my mom is supportive. Despite sadness, I'm relieved not to deal with my dad and Clara anymore. Update 2. Despite blocking them, my dad paid the bills and repaid me. But our relationship worsened. We had a heated argument, and I decided to go no contact. My brother followed suit, and even my mom, who had already stopped talking to my dad, supports the decision. I'm upset, but it's a necessary step for my peace of mind. Stay tuned for more stories from our relationships.